last while since the Dáil has been off, but obviously our campaigning has continued, so I thought I would check in with people. Again, please like, share, all that good stuff, and ask any questions, and I'll do my very best to answer your questions. Probably the number one issue that we've been out campaigning on the ground across Dublin South West on, certainly, has been the issue of RTE and the licence fee. You might have seen the figures come in whereby the payment rates of the licence fee are really collapsing at this stage. So in the first week of August of last year, there were somewhere over 15,000 people paid their licence fee. This year it's down to about 9,500 in that same week. So that's a drop of 37% year on year. But then on top of that, even last year, there already were about 15% of people who weren't paying. So what it indicates is that close now to 50% of people who were due to pay in the first week of August have refused to pay. And effectively people are voting with their wallets in opposition to the scandal of what was revealed at RTE, of the treatment and the culture of those at the very top of RTE on huge salaries, the top presenters and so on, the likes of the secret payments of €75,000 a year to Ryan Tubridy, and the operation of what was effectively a slush fund to wine and dine advertising executives, bringing them to rugby matches, fancy dinner, spending, €5,000 on flip-flops for a party. All the while that ordinary workers in RTE have been faced with pay cuts, or faced with bogus self-employment, freelancers getting €120 for a job that takes days and days to do, correspondents having to record stuff from toilets. So people are voting with their wallets by refusing to pay the licence fee. And for us, it's a very important issue to campaign on. One, to call for an end to the licence fee. It always has been an unjust tax. You can call it a licence fee if you want, but in reality it is a tax that is €160 on most households in the state, regardless of what level of income they have. So that is an unjust, regressive tax. It's also important for us to campaign to try to cut across what is going to be the government agenda here, which is to use the crisis in RTE to undermine public service broadcasting and, as a first step, kind of partially privatise RTE. I think that's what they would certainly like to do. We also know that they would like to, we know because it's like official policy, replace the licence fee with a so-called broadcasting charge that is just a licence fee again, but designed in such a way that people cannot, or certainly would find it much more difficult to evade paying it by giving the power to revenue, like what they did with the household tax. So last week we launched our policy, which is RTE for the people, the idea that we need to scrap the licence fee, but also scrap the commercial funding and sponsorship of RTE. So on a yearly basis, RTE gets about 200 million in licence fee, about 150 million in corporate sponsorship and advertising. And if you look at the crisis and the scandal in RTE, it's very, very clear that where that came from was from the corporate sponsorship advertising side and the pressure of the commercial operation. Effectively what happened there was that the rot set in there, the justification for paying extraordinary salaries to Ryan Tubridy and other so-called talent. It was all justified by, we need to get the advertising in. All these deals with car companies in particular. So we need proper public service broadcasting, which means properly funding it, not relying on commercial funding. And we outlined in our policy, you get it on our PBP website, pbp.ie, how we could introduce a big tech tax to tax the major social media giants in particular, to fund proper public service broadcasting, to allocate 500 million for RT and another 500 million that would then go to local radio stations, newspapers, the likes of the Dublin Inquirer, etc., the likes of the Ditch, could apply for funding and be able to move towards operating on a not-for-profit basis. I see someone saying, who listens to this woke leftist? Obviously, you do. So that's nice. So that's basically our policy, and we're getting a very, very warm response when we're out talking to people. I think people can understand, in a world dominated by social media giants and then the traditional media giants of the Murdochs and so on, the need for public service broadcasting to provide information, to provide news, to provide current affairs, investigations, and also to provide quality dramas, things like Normal People and so on, which should be funded by the public and provided as part of public service broadcasting. Explain the housing bill coming to the Dáil, please. Just looking through the questions. I don't know which housing bill you're talking about there. If you give me more detail, I'll definitely try. What about the huge amount of money Pfizer pumped into RTE? I don't think that's true. What are your thoughts on the pace of eviction when it comes to tenants who damage property? Well, landlords can bring, and even when the eviction ban was in place, if tenants were damaging property, landlords could bring cases to the RTB seeking to evict them. I don't think that there are, in reality, many instances of that. Do any of your policies even happen? They do, partially, sometimes, when we build a big enough movement to force a government to concede them. But we're not in government, so unfortunately our range of socialist policies certainly aren't being implemented. I mean, some of the policies we advocated for that have been implemented, obviously, probably the most high profile was the defeat of the water charges, which was part of a drive towards privatisation of water. The repeal of the Eighth Amendment and winning abortion rights, that was won not by Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil, but won by a movement from below, of which the socialist left was a core and leading component of same-sex marriage. I mean, the eviction ban is a partial implementation of our policies, but then they rode back on it, and even when they implemented it, it was pretty limited. I agree with the person who says landlords don't provide housing, they provide nothing. That's the truth. Houses already exist, the properties already exist. Landlordism as a class is parasitical on society and on the economy. Someone says, just got my TV licence in the bill in the post, I choose not to have a telly, can they still prosecute you? No, that's an absolute 100% cast iron defence. If you don't have a TV, you definitely are not liable to the licence. I'll just go down and see if someone's given any more detail about what they're asking about the housing bill. Hi, Sean. The right to housing bill. We have a right to housing bill, which I think is stuck in committee and isn't going anywhere, unfortunately, which would put the right to housing in the Constitution. So that is designed to ensure that this government, or hopefully a future left government, could have proper rent controls that would bring rents down, could have a proper eviction ban. That's because basically each time we propose those kind of things, the government says, we can't do that because the right to private property is in the Constitution. And we say that, we also need to put the right to housing in the Constitution, and to say, like, the right to the common good already is in the Constitution, so it's kind of links it to that, but to say that the right to housing, the right of people to housing, needs to be taken into account. So to basically strengthen the rights of tenants not to be evicted and so on. Do I agree with the right to private property? Yes, I do, but I think it's not an unlimited right. I don't think people have the right in a housing crisis, when you have 12,000 people officially in over 12,000 in emergency accommodation. You don't have the right to sit on empty property. Vacant property across the state, I don't think you have the right to do that, and I think the state should be able to be empowered to CPO, compulsorily purchase that property and use it to house people. So I think it's there as a right, absolutely, but I also believe in the right of people to have a home. Opinion on Newbridge McDonald's. I don't think I've ever been there. I haven't seen what you're saying about the Gardaí dragging a woman out of her home and arresting her for not having a TV licence. I'd be very surprised if that was the case, but definitely put in a link and I'll check it out if there is anything. There's the Farmers Alliance saying that you do when you pay for the house. That's the big difference between People Before Profit and the Farmers Alliance, is that we think society as a whole has rights. It isn't just about private property. So, IRES REIT, they own over 4,000 properties. We don't think that you have an absolute right to do what you want, to leave them vacant if you want, to charge whatever rents you want. We think that the state has the right to say, people have the right to say, no, we're going to have rent controls to bring rents down to affordable levels. Or even to do what they've done in Berlin, which they had a referendum to say we're going to expropriate, we're going to nationalise the big corporate landlords, the equivalent of IRES REIT, and use them for public ownership. Do I support pay cuts for TDs? I definitely do. I mean, we only take less than the average worker's wage. All of the people for profit TDs do that, but we think all TDs should be on that. Something else I wanted to talk about, and then I will come back on any of the other questions, is about people might have seen these super profits being made by the banks, and you had Simon Harris, government minister, out over the weekend saying, what did he say? It said it was offensive what the banks are doing. But the guy has clearly learned from Leo Varadkar to comment on things as if he's a bystander without any power. The government has power here, so it is true that the profits that the banks are making are offensive. No question about that. The banks, so AIB, Bank of Ireland, PTSB, in the first 6 months of this year, they made €4 billion profits, at 3 times what they made last year. And the reason they made it is very, very simple. So the European Central Bank, people will know, have increased interest rates by about 4% over the past year. So going from a negative interest rate to close to 4%. The banks have put more and more money on deposit with the European Central Bank. So they've taken money that's deposited with them, and they in turn put it on deposit at the European Central Bank. They have about 60 billion on deposit with the European Central Bank. But while they have passed on the increase in interest rates to mortgage holders, who are facing increases in their payments of hundreds of euros a month, many of people struggling with the cost of living crisis and so on, they haven't passed on that increase to depositors. So basically what's called the net interest margin, the difference between what they're able to get at the ECB versus what they're giving out, that's where their profit is coming from. And it is an obscene level of profit. It's, again, profiteering from the cost of living crisis. And so that's where the profits are coming from. It's outrageous. But when the government says it's offensive, that's all very well. What are they going to do about it? And there's 2 things the people before profit are saying should be done about it. One, we should introduce a windfall tax on these profits. So a tax on the net interest margin, so that the profits that are being made from this exploitation of the ECB rate, effectively. So let's tax that and use that money to protect ordinary people and to assist ordinary people, bring in a windfall tax. And secondly, we have a bill that we're going to introduce a maximum mortgage interest rate, so a cap on mortgage interest rates of 3%, to stop the rip-off of ordinary mortgage holders. I will run through some of these some of these questions. What's your opinion on Scottish independence? I would be in favour of Scottish independence. I'd be in favour of a socialist Scotland, as of course I'd be in favour of a socialist England, socialist Wales, socialist Ireland, socialist Europe, and socialist world. But I would support Scottish independence. Favourite political figure? Twice in capital letters. Maybe it's the 3rd time here. James Connolly. Do I support the continued international funding for Ukraine in their fight against Russia? So I certainly support the struggle of Ukrainian people against the invasion of Russia. I think that Putin's invasion is an imperialist, barbaric, horrific invasion. You see what is being done. I think, though, it's important that those of us in the West stand up against the attempt of NATO, the Irish government, to use the war in Ukraine to pursue their own agenda, which has nothing to do with the liberation of ordinary Ukrainian people, whatsoever. It's about pursuing their own agenda of an inter-imperialist rivalry between NATO, led by the US on the one hand, and Russia and China, effectively, on the other hand. And in this country, it's very important that we don't allow this war to be used as the opportunity to effectively abolish what is left of Irish neutrality, which I think is what they would like to do. Can you answer why all the young illegal men are being dumped all over our country? I don't know what you mean by illegal. People aren't illegal. People legally have the right to come here and to apply for asylum. The laws are slightly different, but people fled from this country for many different reasons, going to many other places. Maggie May, please answer my question. Give it again there, because I don't know what it is. Are PPP open to going to government with Sinn Féin? In short, yes, but it depends on what the basis of that government is. So if we, after the next election, if there's a chance to have a government without Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, we'll be voting for that nomination for Taoiseach. Whether we join the government or not would depend on whether we have agreement of a programme for that government, an approach of that government. That means it's going to be a left government that actually take on the power of big landlords, big private developers, the big polluting corporations. In other words, takes on capitalism and fights for eco-socialist change. And with agreement on that programme, we'd participate in that government. If we didn't, we wouldn't participate in the government, but we'd vote for the Sinn Féin nominee for Taoiseach, and we would say we'll vote on a case-by-case basis. If you bring in things that are building housing, moving towards separating church and state, defending Irish neutrality, we'll vote for those things. But if you break your promises, we'll vote against those things, and we'll try and mobilise people from below. You should read our pamphlet on left government on People Before Profit. You can get it on People Before Profit website. Do you think Irish homeless are being discriminated against in their own country? I think all homeless people are being discriminated against in favour of the landlords and the developers. And I think it suits the landlords and the developers to think that the reason Irish people are homeless is because of people coming from Ukraine or Afghanistan or Syria or anywhere else. Of course, that's not true. Like, well before the war in Ukraine, we had very high levels of homelessness. So the discrimination is against the homeless in favour of those at the top, those who profit from the housing crisis, not between different types of homeless people. Thoughts on the fire in Ballybrack? I've only seen reference to it on social media. I haven't investigated much. What I saw, I don't know if it's still being claimed, is that there was effectively anti-immigrant agitators are effectively claiming responsibility for the fire, which would be really horrific if that's the case. Highest immigration figures into Ireland are from Africa. That's not true. Thoughts on unlimited asylum appeals? There aren't unlimited asylum appeals. You can't say whatever the public wants to hear. You just say whatever the public wants to hear and can't even do that right. So you're saying I am saying what the public wants to hear, or you're saying I'm not saying what the public wants to hear? Maggie May, stop skipping me. I'm looking for hope. I'm trying to find your question, Maggie May. Go ahead, put it in again. Eco-socialism will never come to this country. Well, we'll see. Someone calls Maggie a liar, so I don't know what Maggie is saying. Right, okay. I know, read that out. People can read it for themselves. Obviously, I don't know. You're making you're saying something. Obviously, if that's the case, no matter who the man is, that's really, really horrific. I'm very, very sorry to hear that. The new army to keep us in lockdown in the future. I can't go to USA with no passport. Well, there's lots of Irish people in America right now who are known as, what are they called? The undocumented, which means that they have outstayed their legal status. And like all the Irish political parties here campaign for the rights of those people. You may well have relatives. Ireland has been protected by NATO since its founding. It prevented USSR invading Western Europe. I don't agree that that's what happened whatsoever. I think NATO has abused this country, used it for rendition flights to Guantanamo Bay through Shannon Airport, has sent over 3 million soldiers through Shannon Airport to go to the Middle East, to occupy Iraq, Afghanistan at the expense of hundreds of thousands of people dying. A horrific imperialist invasion, just like the Russian invasion of Ukraine is an imperialist invasion. Military trained men. No, that's the official line is military aged men, not military trained men. You've taken it a step further there now, Norma. I don't think there's any evidence that these people are militarily trained, but I certainly am military aged. Should the people in Ireland not get a vote on what's happening? Yeah, they should. I agree. You would trust the Irish in the States, though. That's the difference. Okay. Right. That's the difference. So you don't trust people from other countries. You think people from Ireland are trustworthy. Not one asylum seeker lives in his area. Well, 5 minutes walk from me is a centre for asylum seekers, and I have no problem whatsoever with them. Thoughts on the tunnels under Leinster House? I need to check them out. Who said I was a liar? You did. No, some comment above there said you were a liar. I have no idea whether you were a liar or not. And good if it's with the guards. Unvetted and undocumented illegal. But it's not true that people are unvetted and undocumented. That's also not true. Anyway, what I will do is leave it there. Thanks everyone for your questions. That's a good comment by Peter Hayes there. I'll be back. If not next week, the week after. You can put your questions in again. You can put your same questions in again. I'll answer them again. No problem. Good luck. Take care.